I always thought it would be a hobby until really NIL hit, and it just gave me the opportunity to think of it different.
Endorsement deals are just the tip of the NIL iceberg. Multi-hyphenate athletes are already figuring out how they can carry their brand from their sport to fuel the growth of their creative outlets.
At the same time I was playing and just like being confident and just almost giving me a training ground for being more confident in entrepreneurship and in my art and in showing and in like promoting myself.
Whether they're an artist, a designer, a DJ, a writer, a rapper, the opportunities just got so much bigger.
It's so much bigger now. It's global.
Kazadi has experienced this firsthand. He found his passion as an artist early on and has carried it with him through each step of his football journey. Pre-NIL, during NIL, and now post-NIL, where he's pursuing his passion on an even bigger stage as a creative entrepreneur.
I never thought I would have like a big studio to be able to hold on my work in. I never thought I would work on a 5 by 6 foot painting, and that like these things like they pay for themselves.
In this episode, you will learn what Rod did to capitalize on his NIL opportunity, how he bounced being a multi-hyphenate athlete while playing football at SMU, what you can do to find the right business model for your creativity, and how his creative outlet has helped him successfully transition out of sports. Welcome back to New Game Labs, where we help creators in sports level up in business. It's your host, Kirby Porter. I would love to hear your thoughts as you're listening. You can leave us a comment here on YouTube. Now let's talk with our guest. We kick off our conversation with his experience as a creative pre-NIL.
I did inquire pre-NIL, like, hey, could I sell this stuff? And they're like, you're going to have to completely separate both your art account and your physical account. Don't post on Twitter about your art. Don't say you sold it, but you can say like, hey, look what I'm painting. You can't promote. They were like, you can sell, but you can't promote it. And then you can't do a deal with any, there were so many rules. So yeah, it was just really hard. And you kind of had to jerry rig your own name, image, and likeness. But yeah, post NIL, that was no problem. So kind of got started, but it was interesting. It was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. How would you go about selling art at that time if you couldn't attach your name to it? Was it just through Instagram? Was it more in person? Or like, because you couldn't do that, were you just like, let me just keep it for fun?
Yeah, it was mostly for fun. I just had a bunch of paintings hanging on the wall. And then like the year right before, actually I think it was 2 years before NIL, I had a really big surgery on my ankle. So I had a lot of free time. And so my room was kind of filling with paintings, and then people would come in and be like, oh, like, can I buy that? And I'd be like, yeah, $40. Like, you know, like, because it was, I couldn't really do much with it. Couldn't promote it. It wasn't like a business. It was just like, oh, you know, I'm kind of hungry. I want a sandwich or something like that. But yeah, it was cool. And then I just started like posting on Instagram and just kind of showing people what I was doing, and it slowly like garnered interest, but without the pressure of having a sale or make the sale or having to pay rent. I was in a dorm, so it was just a really fun experience, and just kind of just for a character development, I guess.
Definitely. And I think that's honestly where the best work comes from. It's like when you just started out of passion or for fun. And obviously when there is business opportunity, it's, you know, it's great too, but I think that's what keeps people going is when they start from a place of like genuinely enjoying it. So it's great that you had that. At that point where NIL was like on the horizon, you knew the rule changes were coming. Were you heading into that season being like, bet, like I'm about to run it up? Or were you just like, let me see what happens here?
Well, it was more, somebody said, like, if it's your turn at bat, you got to get them from the fences. So really, like, when I knew July 1st or whenever it was coming, I talked to my parents, I talked to a few different artists, just professionals, and I was like, hey, what are some things that I can do to just get started or just like, you know, get 1% better, same mentality I had as an athlete. So it was more of just starting. It wasn't like trying to do anything with like a super big goal in mind, just like, hey, I'm going to get better at this every single day. I know I'm going to mess up. I don't know. Like we were talking about before, you don't know what you don't know. So I was really prepared to just like use that as a learning year. And you have the kind of cushion of you still being in college, still playing ball, still going to class. So the stakes aren't as high. So really went in there like, okay, I need a website. I need to find a way to make money even when I'm not painting. I need to find a way to sell my paintings. I need to figure out who my audience is. So I think I bought a few different books. Like I bought a book by Jeremy Darlow, bought a book that was like The Creative Entrepreneur, and then at that time I was in advertising, so I majored in advertising. So I kind of had the creative like design background, knew how to use Photoshop, knew how to use a bunch of different apps. So I kind of leveraged everything I learned in school to start towards a business, and then the actual business side came in where it was like, whoa, okay, maybe I need an LLC, like I need a different debit card, I need to figure out like, like business debit versus like a business credit. Didn't know any of that stuff, and didn't really know the different business structures and like a business model. Did I want to go with the subscription? So it was just a whole bunch of things to just figure out. And right before NIL, all I did was say, hey, got a website, got some paintings, let's figure it out. So that was it.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, the Jeremy Darlow book is like a Bible verse. I've read it back and forth so many times and recommend every athlete read that. I was going to ask, like, how did you bring your brand together? And it sounds like you took those steps digitally, but also just even thinking about it holistically, especially in terms of finding your audience. Can you talk about that? Like, how did you figure out who is my ideal audience for my art and the business model piece of it too? Because that's something that a lot of creatives, whether you're creating art or creating content, that's a hurdle that a lot of people struggle with figuring out. So I'd love to hear about this too.
Yeah, so I'll start with the business model, but for that, it was more just figuring out what worked for me, a bunch of trial and error. Trial and error. I think the first thing that kind of didn't go so well is I tried these subscription boxes where people got like a print and like a T-shirt every single time, and like there was a few people buying them and people did like them, but when you're an athlete, you also don't have a ton of time to do some of that stuff. So I was trying to do just a ton by myself. And one thing I would say is like almost like building a team around you to where like when you're in class, when you're in practice, when you've got a really heavy finals load, you can kind of rely on other people to help you. And whether like just finding a really cool way for them to get invested would definitely be something that I wish I would have done. But and then to your other question, building kind of the brand holistically and talking about my target audience, I credit all that to my professors at school. Just like we looked at everything because I specialized in creative but majored in advertising. So we looked at the brief. We were like, hey, so who's this going to? Who's buying it? What's the demographic? How are you going to approach them? What's the human truth? What's your product truth? Is your product better than everybody else's? Human truth, like what's the driving force behind your product? Yeah, so I literally just went through the brief and I was like, okay, so I'm going to treat myself like I am Nike or like I'm a Coca-Cola, whatever it is. And I was like, okay, Coca-Cola has a mark. Coca-Cola has like these really dope commercials, which I went out and a lot of like my demographic was like athletes, like you're saying, athletes, rappers, musicians, college kids, people who were the younger demographic, but wanted to kind of invest in art. So I was just like, okay, like why don't I do like a really cool reel type thing? So I went out, found a videographer, and we did about 4 or 5 reels, and we just kind of put those out, and we used them almost as like commercials. They had the big raw stamped on the end and everything like that. I met up with different business owners and just kind of tried to see if they had a need for art, and a lot of them actually surprisingly, like they did. They wanted like their whole apartment full or their whole space full. So just building my brand was almost like networking with different people, and then also like going through that brief and just seeing what type of person I wanted to be, and then making sure that brand fit with like my values as a person, so that everything was really authentic and it wasn't too hard to kind of continue that even after school, so post.
Yeah, I love the level of intent of like treating your brand like it's a Fortune 50, 500 brand, right? Because I do think even if you're starting small, like thinking that big picture, like I'm going to operate like a Nike or an Uninterrupted or a Coke or a Pepsi, whatever the brand is, like it takes your work to a different level and it helps you move it from hobby to business. And even in the work that you were doing too, of like customer research and getting the right team and thinking about like go-to-market campaigns, like all that level of detail is really helpful when you want to start making that transition from I do this for fun to I want to pursue this as a business. And one thing you mentioned earlier was that the first monetization model that you tried, the subscription in a box, didn't work. Through the research that you were doing, what did you find did work? Was it that one-to-one outreach of like doing custom paintings for people, or what other, things did you test that were like yeah, this is it?
Yeah, so the custom paintings were huge. Like everybody wanted their own thing. And I kept trying to like kind of push like, hey, like buy a print instead, just because it took me less time. And really what I should have been doing is like finding ways to kind of shave time off of like the art. So for example, I did this Kobe right here, Kobe and Michael. But before that, I was like freehanding everything, not putting things in circles, not planning it out before. I kind of just was like, I'm gonna see what comes to me. And then if you're doing that, it kind of sometimes it can take up to like 2 months to do one piece. And as a business owner, like you don't. As a student athlete, trying to run a few different businesses, and then like also like I started a nonprofit before NIL, which like wasn't connected at all. But like trying to do all those different things, I just didn't have enough time. So kind of seeing what other artists were doing to cut time off their paintings, or like what techniques were they doing? Were they going smaller? Were they selling things as a series, painting them all at once? And that's something I think is like really big, just seeing what the people you want to be like are doing. Like I wanted to see what like a Cause was doing, or what a Futura was doing, and just how they were monetizing their products, even if I wasn't on that level. Like if I wanted to do a collectible, I knew I could. Like, where's the 3D printers? How's that? And even though I researched all of it and I still didn't do it, it was just like knowing that I could, and knowing that that was another model that I could use. And yeah, just trying to figure out where your skills fit in wherever you want to go.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes recently has been success leaves clues. And I think that's really important for new founders or new creators. Like if you're starting a podcast, there's probably someone out there that has done something similar, and it's not competition. It's just inspiration, right? Like learn from them, see what their interview style is, how they're monetizing, how they're marketing. And these are all things that you can kind of mold into what you're doing and put your own unique twist on it, versus going into almost like a dark hole and trying to figure it out all by yourself. So while you were doing this, you're also playing football because you just graduated. So
Yeah,
can
now,
you
yeah.
talk to us about like how are you balancing this during the time? And actually, I saw a quote that it was from one of your teammates that like the passion that you had for your art, you had the same passion for the game. So it's like you were attacking both, but objectively, what was it like managing these two together?
Man, hopefully it looked better than it did. I hopefully it looked better from the outside than it did like on the inside. But it was a little bit difficult, and just having to like stay really strict with my schedule. Like, so hey, if I'm at football from 6 to 10 a.m. and then I have class from 10 to 1, and then you start to study, you still got to do all that. Where do I fit in the art? And then it's like you have to do it in this certain amount of time. So it kind of helped having that strict of a schedule. But at the same time, like if you're always waiting for inspiration to hit, you're never going to get anything done. So it was kind of like I really did learn to just start. Like, if I felt like I couldn't do anything, I would like draw a few circles, sketch something out, and then I would be like, okay, I'm going to finish this commission, or I'm going to do this graphic for this person. I'm going to finish these illustrations. I'm just gonna do one thing, and then that one thing turns into 100 other things. Like if you're trying to work on a website, like I'm gonna do one page today. I'm just gonna sit down and do one page, or I'm gonna write one block, and then you'll look up and pretty much the whole thing's gonna be done in an hour. And that just worked for me, just starting and just doing it. But yeah, I think just being passionate about it too, and knowing like it only goes as far as you try, or as efficient as you are is as efficient as your business is going to be, especially when you're like a solopreneur and you don't have a huge team around you and like a bunch of moving parts. So I think like, especially I think it was B-Cross that said that, just having a passion for whatever you're doing, like that's always going to pay off in one way or another, whether it's a passion for networking, passion for just creating. And that's my passion, was just making anything. So it still is, and it's still working.
Yeah, and it's going to show up in the work too. I think passion is a huge differentiator that people underestimate. Like, people can feel when something is copied, I guess, or, just kind of like lifted and shifted versus like someone wakes up thinking about this and goes to sleep thinking about it. Like, you feel it in the work. So while you're playing, it's the first year of NIL, and what's really interesting is that you're figuring out how to transition hobby into business, and you're doing it, you're doing the work. And then you also now have this brand as an athlete that can be monetized. How did those two things work together? Maybe more so on the NIL side now.
Yeah.
During your senior season, how, like, what type of deals, if you were getting deals, or what type of press, like, what did that experience look like as an athlete that also had a creative business and passion?
Yeah, I definitely think I had the benefit of being an athlete and being an artist. So like, I think people were kind of confused about like, okay, when do you have time? Kind of like when you're asking, when do you have time? How are you doing it? Like, were you always artist, or did you just like first day of NIL pop out like 20 paintings? But so I
You're
think
like,
it
yeah,
was
I learned this yesterday.
yeah, just learned it randomly. But yeah, like
Right.
being an athlete definitely helped me, and like understanding like a little bit more about like behind the scenes media, like how do I talk to people, how do I talk about my brand without like being weird about it or bragging about it, or how do I just like be as authentic as I can while talking about football, and then also bringing up like my art at the same time, and really telling people like I wasn't just one thing, and I never was just one thing. Just because I was playing football didn't mean that I was only a football player, and just because I paint does not mean that I'm only a painter or only an artist. So I definitely think like stressing that, and for anybody else who's kind of going through that right now, like stressing that you've always been multiple things at once, kind of helps you contextualize that in your own brain. So talking to the
I'm
media, talking to just coaches, and leveraging those connections that I made while playing were some things that really helped me out. So like talking to different athletes about what they're doing, and like having a willingness to collaborate. For example, if you kind of look through my Instagram, I had a teammate, Tyler Levine. Tyler Levine, actually, Tana Mordecai, or she, Reggie, ton of them. But I did portraits of them all, and I just did it for free. And I was like, hey guys, like if you could post this would be really cool. Like we'll try and get prints of everything. Like if you pay for the print at cost, I'll just do this piece for you. Don't worry about it. And that kind of gave me a big marketing push, and just like, just being genuine and doing something that you're passionate about, and really like coming to people and asking them for almost help, like that goes a really long way. Just using your connections as an athlete.
100%. Collaboration is so key as a creator. And I think what you just highlighted, and something that people can take away from this, is view your art or view your creative work as a platform to elevate others. It's not always just about you in a selfish way. You can use it to tell the stories of other people, whether it's things like doing art, just literally out of the kindness of like, hey guys, I made this for you. And like that kind of comes back to you in the form of like growth, visibility for your work, or podcasting is a great work, joining other people and supporting their work. Like those things go a really, really long way as a creator, especially when you're starting. And how did that season, evolve for you coming out of SMU, being able to carry this business with you? What was that transition like?
Well, yeah, it was kind of a nice transition, especially right after. It felt a little bit abrupt, but I think it always does. But
Yeah.
yeah, just keeping those connections that I made in school, just because they were all authentic. Like I wasn't, if people feel like you're using them for something, they're never gonna like kind of come back and like want to help you out. But if you're into making like a real authentic connection with somebody, like those guys were my friends. I wasn't asking like somebody who just had like a ton of followers, or just
Right.
doing things random. I try to always do something with an intent, and that intent was that my intent was always like longevity. It was always about like a legacy, and the ability to create all the time, and that's kind of my goal, and that's all I wanted. So everything I did had that in mind. So the transition was difficult just because like you're not playing sports anymore. Like you didn't lose the thing you loved. It just kind of changed. Nothing like yeah, nothing ever dies. It just changes. So that the transition in itself was interesting, but I think it was helpful going through all that stuff while I was playing and having shows right after, just really focusing on carrying that momentum. Like, hey guys, I'm done playing football. Here's my first art show, and then it's like, hey, I'm popping up at this gallery, or now I'm on this. I'm doing this interview, and then I think it was like a few months after I graduated, the ESPN article came out, and it was just like a lot of timing to really carry a lot of momentum, and just yeah, I can't stress enough. Just like staying genuine really helped with that transition and staying authentic and being who I was all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Momentum is key in entrepreneurship and creatorpreneurship, I'll call it.
I love it.
And
Entrepreneurship.
also
Forever.
creatorpreneurship. Okay, for the record, I didn't make that up.
Okay.
But saw it on Twitter somewhere. But yeah, no, being able to have momentum and then also having a passion or creative outlet. I feel like as an athlete, it's like you need somewhere to place the energy that you were putting into your sport and putting into like growing yourself as an athlete. And for me, when I graduated, that was like my first podcast. I feel like I shifted all the energy that I had from basketball and poured it all into developing my first podcast, Court to Corporate. And it kind of felt like I had that outlet again of developing myself, feeling like I was getting better, putting in the work, all those, things and adrenaline, I would call it, that we're used to as an athlete. And it's great that so early on you've been able to experience that shift and have that outlet. What were those moments for you, like in that momentum phase, like your gallery show, the ESPN feature? What did that feel like? Because those are, big moments in growth as a creative that's beginning.
Yeah, I think sometimes the problem with momentum is that you never know when it's gonna end. So you're focused on like monetizing the upswing, and you're focused on like kind of like working in that moment. And just like especially with football and the way like Kazadi actually like taught us, but it was always like, hey, if you make a big play, move on. If you make a bad play, move on. So that's kind of the mentality I carried into the next stage. So anything that came out and anything like that happened, I was always really excited and really grateful. But then as soon as, the play's over, I just was like, all right, what's next? What do I do? How do I figure this out? What's my plan? And really creating a debrief with myself and my team, and just being like, hey guys, what do we see? What could we have done better? What can we be better prepared with next time? What are some opportunities that we missed? Then just really just taking the same language and using that for your new life, and it makes the transition a lot easier because like you're still a competitor, you're still playing a game, you're still trying to win. It's all about like how does that transition, and if you do it the right way, it all transitions. Like just because you're not running around and hitting people, like my shoulders feel great now, but it's just you're still having to hit that sled, and you're still having to do the little things right, and you're still having to pay attention to detail, and you're still having to make sure there's an intent behind everything you do, and you're not doing anything that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So 6 months out, what does your creative business look like today? And how do you feel like you've evolved as an entrepreneur in the past year?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely a little bit, I know how to say no. I think that would be my top one. Like just saying no has been kind of crazy to be able to do and be like, hey, I love the idea for your project, but I'm not able to do it right now. Would we be able to like reconvene in a month or so? And just really understanding like, hey, if they really like my work and if it really was like a bad time, then they'll swing back and we'll figure it back out. And so just saying no was big. And then how it looks, yeah, it looks kind of crazy. Like I never thought I would have like a big studio to be able to hold on my work in. I never thought I would work on a 5 by 6 foot painting. In that like these things like they pay for themselves. Like I always thought it would be a hobby until really NIL hit, and it just gave me the opportunity to think of it different, and just really be like invest in myself at the same time I was playing, and just like being confident and just almost giving me a training ground for being more confident in entrepreneurship and in my art and in showing and in like promoting myself. So it's been really
Yeah.
interesting. And, hopefully it keeps evolving, but it's already different than what I thought it'd be.
I love that. And especially in entrepreneurship, it's like crazy to look back, just even in 3 month, 6 month increments, and look at how much you've grown sometimes. It's like, wow, 6 months ago, I did not think I'd be doing what I'm doing now. So it makes me so excited for you because I'm like, just imagine where you'll be if we have this conversation at the end of next year. So,
Yeah. There's always like I think what people don't talk a lot like about a lot is we're just talking about like super long days. Like sometimes that just happens. Just like have a really you'll just have like a 12-hour day, you have a 15-hour day. Sometimes you'll wake up at 5 a.m. and then you'll go to sleep at 12 and then you got to do it again the next day. And I think like being an athlete also like kind of trains you for that too, because like not everything is awesome all the time. Like just sometimes things are really hard and you kind of question and you're like, should I be doing this? Like maybe I could get like a regular job, maybe like maybe I can get a regular job and do this. And and you start kind of like
right.
second-guessing yourself, but you've always like I think you have to allow for that and like allow for that like, that doubt to kind of fizzle out and like understand that it's not so much a negative emotion. You're just like you might be a little bit afraid, and fear is not always bad. Sometimes it's a driving force. So really just like contextualizing what you feel and where you're at and sitting down and being like, okay, where do I want to go? And if I saw something by James Clear, it was like, what happens if I speed up and what happens if I slow down? And just kind of asking yourself those questions. Like sometimes slowing down is what you need. You just need a break. You just need to take a step
Yeah.
back and be like, hey, not going to do this project for this week. And then sometimes it's like, all right, let's go to the wall. Let's go as fast as we
Yeah.
can. And it really helps you out. So just taking inventory for yourself and really figuring out, when we were playing, it's like, does my knee hurt? Does my shoulder hurt? Do I need to tape it? Do I need to get in the ice bath a little bit more? Do I need to go to the training room? But now it's all on you. So you just have to figure out like what works for you and what works best. And like, when you're feeling a little sore, figuratively, like take care of yourself.
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up because that is one of the most common experiences I feel like, especially in creative entrepreneurship, where the path isn't like cookie cutter clear. We're
Yes.
all kind of making it up as it's like this, and we're making it up. Like we're defining what the path looks like for our creative business to evolve. And there have been so many times this year too where I've been like, should I be doing this right now? Like, should I
Yeah.
just like do something else? And I love that sometimes it's like acknowledge that you're feeling these things and then lock in, right? Like every time I've felt that, I allow myself to feel it, and then I'm like, no, like double down. Like let's commit to doing this and like see how far it goes. And it's so key. And also on slowing down to speed up, that is something that I have had to learn several times this year because creator burnout is real. And I think the traditional advice for creators is like post every single day on every single platform and 5 times on every platform too, or you're not going to make it. And it's
Yeah.
just really not sustainable. I'm like, it's just, I don't think it's sustainable. And there have been so many times, like, I feel like even this fall where I've allowed myself to slow down. I'm like, you know what? I went really hard on LinkedIn this year. I'm going to take a few days. And like during those days, I've been able to think bigger picture and, plan for next year and find, different opportunities that I might have missed if I was just going. So these are 2 really important messages that I want people listening to take away. It's like, it's okay if you're feeling like what am I doing? And then also slow down. So thank you for sharing that. I would love to, before we get into our rapid fire advice session, I love to talk more about your work and like what your creative process is. We're looking at this really dope Kobe NJ painting behind you for watching this on video. I love it. I want to hear about your creative process. Like I love like learning how other creators work. So can you talk to us about that? I'm sure it's like evolved, but what does it look like for you now?
Yeah, well, it's all over the place. As you can see, there's like 12 different styles back here. But Yeah, it really depends on like what I'm feeling. If I'm feeling like a little bit more loose, it just goes back to taking inventory. Like, okay, like I'm having some trouble with inspiration. Let me get a little bit more like realistic. And then it's like as you go, you're like, you know what? I don't like realism that much. And it's like you just mess with it as it goes. Like this, Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, my bad. But I was watching some videos and I watched the movie. It was with him and the Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran, and I was watching it and I loved the way he trained. So just like I was inspired, got up, spray painted a whole lot, did a lot of paint, and then I just drew on top of it. This one was heavily planned out, um, like down to the lines. Like so, I'm like, hey, here's the darks, here's the lights, here's what's gonna go. Yeah, just like at first I wanted to do like almost I wanted to be like a hue, but now I was like, you know what? Like I think regular, like doing it regular colors and just like color blocking it is cool. So I think just staying fluid is my creative process, and then just like whenever I feel an inspiration or whenever it's just like a personal project, I just start. Same as everything. Like
Yep.
my creative process is literally starting. And when I was telling you, like I run before I can walk. Sometimes I do that. Like I like to be almost overwhelmed and then be like, okay, what's my process now? Now that I've done that, now that you know I did this 6 foot piece and I had no idea, like it starts blank and you're kind of like, okay, what am I gonna put on this? You kind of just start, take whatever idea that's been brewing in your head and throw it on there. Sometimes it looks cool, sometimes it doesn't, and then you just gotta give yourself grace when it doesn't, and kind of move on and figure out what works when it does. So that's kind of my process. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of I mean, not much of a process if you're thinking about it. But
It's a method. It's a
yeah,
method.
more of a
Sounds
method.
cooler.
Yeah, way more method. So
It's a method to madness.
yeah, just having fun with it and just letting myself like stay kind of loose. That I guess that would be my more of my method than my process.
Yep, I love it. Especially in creative work, I think sometimes you have to let all the ideas flow and then reel it in with like the step by step. And I think that's where the best work comes versus like, I don't know, I guess a parallel for me is like if I'm looking at I have to fill in 5 posts this week for LinkedIn. That never works for me. I just need to be able to brain dump. Like these are all the things about creators in sports, and then reel it in. So I feel you. I feel you.
It's that passion, like it's that passion factor, and like being able to like kind of like carve your passion into something that's like digestible for a consumer. It just works. It's kind of like yeah, like so like when you're playing ball, like you're really passionate about playing ball or being competitive, whatever it is. Then you get like you get the plays, and you get the technique, and then you put in the effort, and it's the same thing. Attention, yeah, attention, effort, technique. So it's all the same.
All the same things. Absolutely. All right, let's get into our rapid fire. So this is basically like messages to your younger self. And I've thought about like 3 different phases of maybe like areas in life where you had learnings. And I'd love to know, what advice would you give to yourself when you were starting with NIL, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, build it. Definitely get people involved with me. Like, hey guys, I have a plan. Why don't we try and do this instead of like trying to do it all by myself? I would research a little bit more about what I wanted to do and what were other people's processes. How did it look? What was their journey? I've been watching idea generation a lot on YouTube, and there's all these like clips and podcasts with all these people who started out, just they were playing in their basement, or they were just like making beats at school, and then they turned into Timbaland. And it's like, okay, how did that work? And you kind of can learn from other people's mistakes. And I think really, I wouldn't say you have to read a lot, but what I say is like just get as much information as you can about what you want to do before you do it. And then another one is stop. I used to think about everything a whole lot before I did it. So just start as fast as you can. Fail fast was something that somebody told me. Fail really fast and then figure out what you did wrong and do it better next time.
Yeah. What advice would you give to yourself when you first raised your prices for your art?
Don't just send the text. Yeah, my advice
The
would be
price
just
is the price.
yeah, the price, and like if you know if they love it enough, they'll get it, and you know there's like this golden area to where like your your technique and like your prowess meets with the price. So like a lot of times I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of like they overestimate a little bit. They're like, nah, like I'm worth this much. Yeah, like you are intrinsically worth that much, but like, does your work match what you're asking people to pay? And maybe that's why sometimes people don't want your product because that happened to me. Like when I first started out, I was like, yeah, well, this is I don't know $2,000, and they were like, no, it's not. So then I was like, okay, let me look at like other $2,000 pieces. Let me see what's going on, and then you slowly get to like, okay, well, maybe it's not, and then your technique and everything else like kind of brushes up. But my biggest thing would be like set your price and then also make sure that your price meets with your
Your market demand. Yeah.
Market demand, all that. Yeah.
Yep.
Price meet with your market demand, and then like quality of your work too. Like if it's a good quality, like you'll find someone.
Absolutely. Be honest with yourself. It's key. All right, last one. What advice would you give to yourself when you were first transitioning out of football?
Oh man, that's such a hard question. Sometimes I forget that I'm not playing. I'll wake up at like 6 a.m. and be like, oh, okay,
You'd be like, I'm ready. I got the pads.
I have the same backpack and everything, but I would say, take a minute to breathe. Yeah, just really take a second to, understand what your body went through, where you went, and like, it's good to go fast, but like we were talking about before, it's also good to take it slow. And just really figuring out like what is best for you without, people making you wake up or screaming at you. Like, how do you process? Like, if you can wake up at 5 a.m. without anybody yelling at you, do it. If you wake up at 7 a.m. but get just as much done, do it. Just like make sure you're staying consistent in your goal and that you're not doing anything for a reason. That would be the only advice I gave myself. Just stay consistent and make sure you're doing things that make sense.
Yeah, it is like the first time you really get to pause and think for yourself, because you're not just on this like track of like practice, go to this level, to this level, to this level. Like you can just breathe, and it's such a valuable time. So it's like almost reframing the transition to like, oh, I get to define what I want my path to be like going forward. So could not agree more. Thank you so much. I had such a great time during this interview. I feel like I even have tips around how to be a better creative entrepreneur for, recent graduated athletes to those that are still playing, and so appreciate you joining us. Where can people support you? That's the most important question.
Yeah. Well, people can find me on Instagram. It's RA5UN. And then if you just want my art, it's Rasun Art. So RASUN Art. And then my website is RasunKazadi.live. So that's where people can find me, support. I appreciate it. Send me a message, anything. I love to hear it all.